They say a warship fell to a single farm. No armies, no weapons, just one human and a promise. How did a quiet world make the galaxy tremble? Tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe to see why. Ben Maddox woke up to his house shaking. Not the gentle tremor of Taraxis 4's occasional seismic activity, but something deeper. Something that made his teeth rattle and sent his coffee mug tumbling off the nightstand. He stumbled outside in his worn work boots and froze. A shadow covered his entire farm. Not clouds, not a storm, a shadow with edges. His eyes followed the darkness up, 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 until they found the source. Sitting on top of his barn, legs dangling like a child on a fence, was a figure that shouldn't exist. 12 meters tall, maybe more. Skin that shimmered blue-silver in the morning light. Eyes like twin auroras, sad and ancient. She was looking right at him. Ben's mouth went dry. 5 years of solitary farm life hadn't prepared him for this. His hand moved instinctively toward the plasma rifle he kept by the door. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she sat, hunched and exhausted. Or maybe it was how carefully she'd positioned herself to avoid crushing his solar panels. The giant spoke, her voice resonating like distant thunder made gentle. "I did not know this was your dwelling. I felt warmth here." Ben stared at the flattened remains of his NCC 1701B tractor, its wheels pointing skyward at tragic angles. 40 years of scrap metal and jerry-rigged parts, crushed like a tin can. "Ma'am," he heard himself say, voice shaking only a little, "you're sitting on my barn, and that was my tractor." She looked down, and for a moment, something almost human crossed her face. Shame, maybe, or the exhaustion of someone who'd run out of places to rest. "I am sorry. I have been falling for a long time." Rusty, his maintenance bot, chose that moment to waddle out and bark his electronic greeting. "Good morning, Dave. Unidentified large object detected." The giant flinched, nearly toppling the water tower. Ben made a decision he'd later realize changed everything. He held up one hand, the universal gesture for wait, and walked to his storage shed. When he returned, he was dragging irrigation hoses, 3 of them connected in series. "You thirsty?" She blinked, those aurora eyes widening. "You are not afraid." "Oh, I'm terrified," Ben said, connecting the hoses to his well pump. "But you look like you've been afraid longer." The makeshift water system sputtered to life. It would take him an hour to fill even a fraction of what she'd need, but she waited, patient as a mountain. When the first drops reached her, she cupped her massive hands and drank. Each swallow was the volume of his bathtub. When she finished, she looked at him with something he couldn't name. Why? Ben thought about his wife, 5 years gone. About the empty house he talked to only through Rusty's pre-programmed responses. About the last time someone had asked him for anything at all. Because running out of water is the worst way to go. Nobody deserves that. Not even someone who sits on barns. She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. The ground trembled slightly. "I am Lyrathin, last of the coral. We were declared extinct. Ben Maddox, last one living on plot 42. We were declared irrelevant." He squinted up at her. "Looks like the universe got both calls wrong." She looked at him for a long moment, then carefully, so carefully, shifted her weight off his barn. The structure groaned but held. She settled into his empty field instead, leaving a crater the size of a pond. "I will try not to crush anything else," she said quietly. "Appreciated." Ben looked at his flattened tractor, then at her. "Can you lift things?" She nodded. "Good. Tomorrow we'll see if you can help with the irrigation tower. It's been broken for months." Lyrathin tilted her head, a gesture that seemed curious and confused at once. "You would trust me with your equipment after I destroyed your vehicle?" "Equipment's already broken. You can't make it worse." He started walking back to his house, then paused. "Also, you're sitting in my field. Might as well make yourself useful." Oh. As he reached his door, He heard her voice, softer now, almost a whisper that still carried like wind through canyons. "Thank you, small one. I have not been useful in a very long time." Ben didn't turn around, but his hand stopped shaking. Inside, Rusty beeped. "Dave, your heart rate has decreased to normal levels. Shall I prepare breakfast?" "Yeah," Ben said, watching through the window as the giant carefully arranged herself to avoid his crops. "And Rusty, make extra. I think we're going to need to figure out what 12 meters of alien eats." The bot processed this for exactly 3.7 seconds. Calculating, that is a lot of pancakes, Dave. Despite everything, despite the impossible creature in his field, and his crushed tractor, and the fact that his quiet life had just shattered like dropped glass, Ben Maddox smiled. "Yeah," he said, "it is." Outside, Lyrathan watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of red and gold. Colors that, in her culture, meant the end of empires. But maybe here, on this small world with this strange, kind human, they meant something else. Maybe they meant beginning. 3 days later, Ben's farm looked different. The irrigation tower he'd been unable to fix for 8 months now stood straight, its solar panels gleaming. Lyra had lifted it with one hand, while Ben welded the support struts, her fingers steady as bedrock. "You could have just held it while I worked," Ben said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You didn't have to stay perfectly still for 2 hours. I did not want to jolt you. Your tools produce fire." He looked up at her, shielding his eyes from the sun. "You were afraid you'd startle me? You are very small and soft. I could break you by breathing wrong." Ben thought about that, thought about how careful she'd been, sleeping in the same spot each night to avoid crushing new ground. How she'd asked permission before moving his broken harvester. How she flinched every time Rusty barked. "You're not going to hurt me," he said. "You cannot know that. I know you counted my solar panels before you sat down that first day. I know you've been eating half rations because you think I can't afford to feed you, and I know you spent 6 hours yesterday digging a drainage ditch, even though I didn't ask, because you noticed my south field was flooding." Lyra was quiet for a moment. "You observed all that? You're 12 meters tall. You're not exactly subtle." He packed up his tools. "Come on, I want to show you something useless." "Useless? You'll see." He led her to his porch, the one that faced west toward the red-gold horizon. He'd built it himself after Sarah died, needing a place to sit with his grief. He poured himself coffee from his ancient thermos and settled into his chair. Lyra knelt nearby, her presence like a living monument. "What are we doing?" "Waiting." "For what?" "You'll see." The sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of crimson and amber. Taraxis 4 had a thin atmosphere, which made the sunsets brief but spectacular. Colors that had no names washed across the clouds. Ben sipped his coffee, bitter and too hot, and perfect. Lyra watched in silence. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she spoke. "When the sky turns red like this, in my culture, it is the sign of an empire's end. The last light before darkness claims everything." Ben didn't look at her. "For me, it's just the time to have coffee and try not to think about anything at all." She made a sound, something between a laugh and a sigh. The porch trembled just slightly. "Perhaps that is why you survive so much. You do not complicate the miracle." "The miracle?" "Being alive, watching light change color, drinking bitter water because it is warm." Ben considered that. "Your people don't do this? Just sit?" "We calculated sunsets, measured their spectral composition, predicted them centuries in advance." Her voice carried something that might have been regret. "But we never simply watched them. There was no logic in it, no efficiency." "Sounds exhausting." "It was." She shifted, and Ben noticed for the first time how her luminescent skin seemed dimmer than that first day. "I did not understand what we lost until I lost everything else." until sitting in a field watching a human drink bad coffee seemed like the most reasonable thing in the universe. They sat in silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. Rusty wandered out, settling at Ben's feet with a contented beep. "Your mechanical companion is defective," Lyra observed. "It called you Dave. Your name is Ben." "It's a reference. Old Earth movie. Made me laugh the first time, so I never fixed it." "You kept a malfunction because it produced joy?" "Pretty much." "Oh, that is irrational." "Yep." Another silence, comfortable now. Then Lyra spoke again, softer. "My people valued perfection above all else. No flaws, no inefficiencies, no room for things that merely brought joy." She looked at her hands, each finger the size of his torso. "Perhaps that is why we fell. We optimized away everything that made falling bearable." Ben finished his coffee. "My wife used to say I was too practical. Said I needed to break more things on purpose, just to remember life doesn't come with an instruction manual. She sounds wise. She was. Died anyway." He stood, bones creaking. "That's the thing about wisdom. Doesn't make you bulletproof. But she was right. Best things in my life have been the unplanned ones, the broken ones." Am I a broken thing, Ben Maddox?" He looked up at her, this impossible creature who'd fallen from space onto his barn, who moved mountains and feared hurting sparrows. "No, you're the unplanned thing. Big difference." She smiled then, really smiled, and for a moment her skin brightened, casting blue-silver light across the field. Somewhere in the distance, Rusty's sensors chirped in confusion. "I think I understand coffee now," she said. "It is not about the beverage." "No? It is about the stopping. The moment between tasks when you remember you are alive." "Pretty much." Ben collected his thermos. "Same time tomorrow?" "I would like that very much." As he headed inside, she called after him. "Ben?" "Yeah? Thank you for not making me efficient." He waved without turning around, but she saw his shoulders shake with quiet laughter. That night Lyra stayed awake, watching the stars she'd fallen from. And for the first time since her world died, she felt something strange and warm in her chest, something her people had calculated away centuries ago. She felt home. 3 systems away, in a ship that smelled of metal and greed. A sensor lit up. A Xyrath hunter leaned forward, mandibles clicking in satisfaction. Coriel biosignature confirmed. Taraxis Afu, frontier world, minimal defenses. His partner loaded weapons with practiced efficiency. How much is the bounty again? 3 billion credits, dead or alive. Then dead is easier. Their ship changed course, burning hard toward a small farming world where a human drank coffee and a giant learned to sit still. Neither Ben nor Lyra saw the distant contrails as drones entered the atmosphere. But Rusty did. "Dave," the bot announced cheerfully, "unidentified objects approaching. Shall I prepare defensive protocols?" Ben was already asleep. The message went unheard. And the red sky, beautiful just hours ago, suddenly felt like prophecy after all. Ben woke to Rusty's alert siren, a sound the bot reserved for genuine emergencies. Through his window, he saw them. 12 combat drones, sleek and predatory, circling his farm in perfect formation. A holographic display materialized above his porch. The figure was humanoid, vaguely reptilian, wearing armor that probably cost more than Ben's entire farm. Xyrath Consortium insignia gleamed on its chest. "Human farmer, you harbor a fugitive. Surrender the Corail, and we will spare your structures." Ben stepped outside, still in his sleeping clothes, and looked up at Lyra. She'd risen to her feet, every muscle tense, skin flickering with distressed light patterns. Her eyes, usually soft as Aurora's, had gone hard and distant. She was preparing to run, or fight, maybe both. "Hold on," Ben called up to her. Then to the hologram. "What's the charge?" "Existing. The Coral were declared extinct." "She is a clerical error requiring correction." "That's not a crime. That's paperwork." The hologram's expression didn't change. "Surrender her, or we eliminate both targets. Ben thought about his options, thought about his plasma rifle, which had maybe 6 shots before the power cell died, thought about calling for help on a planet where the nearest neighbor was a 3-hour flight away, thought about Sarah and how she'd called him stubborn enough to argue with gravity. "No," he said. "Excuse me?" I said no. She's not a fugitive. She's a person who crashed. There's a difference. The drones shifted, weapons charging with that distinctive whine Ben had heard too many times in the colony wars. Lyra made a sound, something between a growl and a plea. "Ben Maddox, move. They will kill you for standing there." "Yeah, probably." He didn't move. "But you're not running. Not from my porch." The hologram flickered with what might have been confusion. "You would die for this?" "I'd die for a lot of things. Good coffee, a decent sunset, the principle that living's not a crime." He looked up at Lyra. "And I'd definitely die for someone who spent 2 hours holding perfectly still so I wouldn't get burned by my own welder." The first drone fired, a warning shot that vaporized Ben's water tower in a column of superheated steam. Lyra moved. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She simply moved, faster than anything that large should be able to move, and her hand swept through the air like a meteor given purpose. The drones didn't explode so much as cease existing. 12 machines, each worth 1,000,000 credits, reduced to component atoms by the shockwave of her passage. The hologram cut out in a burst of static. Silence fell like a hammer. Then Lyra stumbled backward, staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. Her breathing came fast and shallow, each exhalation a windstorm that bent the crops flat. "I killed them. I killed them. I killed them." "They were drones," Ben said, approaching slowly. "No one inside." "But I could have. Ben, I could have." Her voice rose, cracking with something that might have been panic or grief or both. "Do you understand? I am a weapon. I was born to be a weapon. My people shaped us for war, and when the war ended, they did not know what to do with us. So they let us die. They let our world burn because weapons in peacetime are just problems waiting to happen." Her legs folded, and she knelt in his field, 12 meters of living starship, brought low by her own strength. And then she cried. Each tear was the size of Ben's fist, and where they fell, they carved divots into the earth. Small craters that filled with water and light, glowing faintly with the bioluminescence of her grief. Ben stood there, covered in dust from the destroyed drones, and watched this titan weep, watched her try to make herself smaller, as if she could fold her terrible power away into something manageable and safe. He walked forward, stepped over the glowing tears, reached out and placed his hand against hers. His palm covered maybe one joint of one finger. His skin, weathered and scarred from 40 years of farming, looked impossibly fragile against her luminous armor plating. "You're not a monster," he said quietly. "Monsters destroy because it feels good, because they want to. You destroyed drones because they were going to kill us both." He pressed harder, as if he could somehow anchor her through touch alone. "You're just scared and tired and so damn far from home." She looked at him, aurora eyes swimming with light. "I am dangerous. Yeah, so is fire. So is the sun. So is every person who's got the strength to hurt someone." He didn't let go. "Being dangerous isn't the same as being wrong. It's what you do with it that matters. And you? You've spent a week being so careful around me, I bet you haven't slept right once. You've been counting every breath, measuring every step, terrified you'd crush something I cared about. Because I could. But you haven't." He smiled, tired and sincere. "You know what that makes you? Not a monster, just someone trying real hard to be gentle in a universe that never taught you how." She was quiet for a long time, her breathing gradually slowing. Finally, she spoke, voice barely audible. "They will come back, with more ships. They will not stop until I am dead, or they are." "I know. You should make me leave." "Yeah, I should." He finally released her hand, stepping back. "But I won't. This is your home now, if you want it. And nobody gets to take that away, just because some accountant in an office declared you erased." Lyra looked at him, really looked at him, this small, stubborn human standing in her tears like they were just rain. That night, after Ben had gone inside, after Rusty had finished his patrol, Lyra stayed awake. She watched the little house with its broken shutters and its porch that smelled like coffee and old wood. She made a promise, silent and absolute. "I will protect your little world, Ben Maddox, even if protecting it means becoming the weapon I fear I am. Even if it costs me everything I have left." The stars above offered no answer, but they didn't need to. She already knew what she would do. And somewhere in orbit, a Zyrith frigate calculated trajectories and loaded ordnance, preparing for a bombardment that would erase one troublesome farm and its impossible residents. They didn't know they'd just made the worst mistake of their profitable careers. They were about to discover what happens when someone threatens a giant's only home, and the human who made her believe she deserved one. The frigate arrived at dawn, blotting out the sunrise. It hung there like a hammer waiting to fall, bristling with weapons that could crack continents. Ben stood on his porch, coffee in hand, looking up at his death. Lyra stood in the field, perfectly still, and he could see the war happening behind her eyes. Run or fight. Save herself or save him. The same hologram from before materialized, larger now, more official. "Final offer, human. The Coriel surrenders in 1 hour, or we begin bombardment. Your planetary government has declined to intervene. You are economically negligible. She is worth 3 billion credits. Do the mathematics." Ben took a long sip of his coffee, bitter and perfect. Then he walked to his storage shed and pulled out the long-range comm unit he'd salvaged from a crashed transport 5 years ago. He'd kept it working, mostly because he liked fixing things. He keyed it to broadcast on all local frequencies. "This is Ben Maddox, Plot 42, Line 42, Tyraxis 4, to whoever's listening on that ship." He paused, making sure they heard every word. "You want the giant? You'll have to go through the human who teaches her to make bread." Static silence. Then, almost curious, the hologram responded. "Bread? Yeah, bread and coffee, and how to watch sunsets without measuring them, and how to sit still without it being efficient." Ben smiled, cold and determined. "See, she's not your 3 billion credit problem anymore. She's my friend, and on this farm, we don't give up friends just because some spreadsheet says it's logical. You cannot stop us." "Probably not, but I'm going to try anyway. That's what we do. We try impossible things because someone should, and nobody else is around." He cut the transmission and turned to Lyra. She was staring at him like he'd just sprouted wings. "Ben, that was suicide." "Yeah. But it sounded good, right?" He was already moving, dragging equipment from his shed. "Now help me. We've got maybe 30 minutes before they decide talking is boring." What followed was organized chaos. Ben pulled plasma cutters, mining charges, and electromagnetic accelerators, all salvaged tech he'd been hoarding for repairs that never came. Lyra moved his old harvester frame, the one he'd been meaning to scrap, into position. "What are we building?" "Something stupid that might work. Hold this." She held the frame while he welded plasma projectors to the sides, mining charges to the front, and somehow, impossibly, jury-rigged the whole thing to run off his tractor's power core. The NCC 1701B's flattened corpse finally gave its life for something magnificent and absurd. It looked like a tractor had mated with a tank and produced something deeply confused about its purpose in life. "You cannot fight a warship with farm equipment," Lyra said, but she was already gathering boulders from the ridgeline, each one the size of a small house. "Watch me." The attack came exactly 30 minutes later. Fighter drones first, 40 of them, screaming down from the frigate like angry hornets. Then the bombardment cannons charged, humming with the promise of annihilation. Ben climbed into his contraption, strapped himself in, and keyed the ignition. It started with a sound like tortured metal having an argument with physics. "Come on, you beautiful disaster," he muttered and punched the accelerator. What happened next would be told in bars across 3 systems for years, though nobody quite believed it. A human farmer in a weaponized tractor fought 40 military drones. His plasma cutters, meant for welding, carved through 2 fighters before overheating. His mining charges, lobbed with desperate precision, caught 3 more. His electromagnetic accelerator, designed to move ferrous rocks in fields, yanked 2 drones together in mid-air like magnetic lovers, and Lyra, beautiful and terrible, through mountains. She'd calculated angles and trajectories her entire life. Now she used that knowledge to intercept missiles with boulders, to shield Ben's insane vehicle with walls of stone, to grab fighters from the air and crush them like tin cans. They were losing. Slowly, inevitably losing. Then Ben's tractor took a direct hit. The explosion threw him 20 meters, tumbling through smoking crops. He hit the ground hard, tasted blood, and couldn't remember how to make his legs work. Through failing vision, he saw Lyra turn, saw her see him fall, saw something in her massive face that might have been the moment every careful, gentle instinct shattered against something older and more fundamental. She screamed. It wasn't a sound, it was a force. The air itself seemed to crack, and light erupted from her chest, from the crystalline core that powered her species, the living star that made Kor-El more than flesh. She rose to her full height, and for the first time since Ben met her, she was not trying to be small. She was fury given form, grief weaponized, love turned incandescent. Her hand moved, trailing light like a comet, and where it passed, fighters dissolved into particles. The bombardment beam meant to kill them both met her palm, and she caught it, held it, compressed it between her fingers until it collapsed into itself. Then she jumped. The ground cratered beneath her, and she sailed upward, a giant woman flying on nothing but rage and desperate love. She reached the frigate, wrapped her arms around its hull, and channeled every remaining photon of her core energy into its shields. The shields, designed to withstand nuclear weapons, lasted 4.3 seconds. Then they failed. The frigate began to fall, trailing fire and disbelief. Lyra fell with it, her light dimming, her strength finally completely spent. They hit in different places. The frigate in the northern ridge, where it would burn for 3 days. Lyra in Ben's field, in the craters her tears had made, now filled with her glowing blood. Ben crawled. His legs weren't working right, and his ribs were doing things ribs shouldn't do, but he crawled through smoking earth until he reached her. "Why?" he gasped, barely able to form words. "Why would you do that?" She looked at him, Aurora eyes fading to almost human blue. Her voice was a whisper now, barely audible. "Because you gave me something I thought my species lost forever." "What?" "A home, not a place, not coordinates on a map. A home." She smiled, weak and genuine. "You taught me that sitting still can be enough. That coffee at sunset means you are alive. That being gentle is not the same as being weak." Her hand moved, just slightly, to touch his shoulder with one fading finger. "You taught a weapon how to be a person again. How could I not protect that? How could I not protect you?" The last of the light faded from her skin. Her breathing slowed. And as Ben watched, something impossible happened. She began to shrink, not dying, transforming, her body compressing, adapting, pulled by gravity and desperation into something new. The process took minutes that felt like hours, and when it finished, she was still there, still breathing, still alive, but no longer 12 meters tall, barely 2, human-sized, human-shaped, still luminous, still clearly other, but small enough to touch without destroying. She opened her eyes, confused and exhausted. What happened? Ben laughed, tasted blood, laughed harder. "I think the planet liked you back." Then everything went dark, but he was smiling, because they'd done it. They'd done the impossible thing. Together. Ben woke up 3 days later to the smell of burned coffee and medical foam. His ribs were wrapped in emergency gel cast, the kind that itched like hell, and meant bones were knitting themselves back together. Rusty sat by his bed, optical sensors dim with what might have been robotic worry. "Good morning, Dave. You have been unconscious for 72 hours. A guest has been maintaining your vital signs." Guest. Right. The giant who'd fallen on his barn. Except when he turned his head, she was sitting in Sarah's old chair by the window, and she wasn't giant anymore. Lyrathan looked up from the book she'd been reading. One of his old manuals on crop rotation, he realized. Her skin still shimmered blue-silver and her eyes still held that aurora quality, but now she was just tall. Basketball player tall, not skyscraper tall. "You are awake," she said, relief evident in every syllable. "I was beginning to worry. You're small. I am appropriately sized for this gravitational environment." She stood and he realized she was moving carefully, testing her new proportions like someone learning to walk again. The transformation was involuntary. My body adapted to survive. I believe the planet's gravity, combined with the depletion of my core energy, triggered a metamorphosis my species has not experienced in millennia. "So you're stuck like this?" She was quiet for a moment. "Yes. The change is permanent. I will never be what I was." She looked at her hands, normal-sized now, no longer capable of moving mountains. "I am weak, vulnerable, small." "You're alive," Ben said. "Small's not so bad. Join the club." She laughed, soft and surprised. "The club of small things?" "The club of things that shouldn't work but do anyway." He tried to sit up, groaned, gave up. "How bad is the farm?" "The northern ridge is unsalvageable. Your tractor is, in your words, completely scrapped. The barn requires significant repairs. 40% of your crops were damaged." She paused. "But the house is intact. The well is functional, and the porch where we drink coffee survived without a scratch. Priorities. The universe has them." She moved closer, kneeling by his bed. At this size, her face was just a face. Beautiful, strange, but no longer requiring him to crane his neck skyward. He could see expressions he'd missed before. The small crinkle by her eyes when she almost smiled. The way her bioluminescence pulsed slightly faster when she was nervous. "Ben Maddox, I have no money, no resources, no way to repair what was destroyed defending this place." Her voice was steady, but he heard the uncertainty beneath it. "I am, by any practical measure, worthless now, so I must ask. Do you want me to leave?" He stared at her. "Are you seriously asking me that? You have every right to be angry. I brought war to your peaceful existence. I cost you equipment and crops and nearly your life. You also saved my life, and learned to make actually drinkable coffee, which frankly I thought was impossible." He managed to prop himself up on one elbow. "Lyra, you threw a mountain at a warship. You grabbed a bombardment beam with your bare hands. You literally hugged a frigate to death because it was trying to kill me, and you're asking if you can stay. I destroyed your tractor. I'll steal another one. I am no longer useful. I cannot move irrigation towers or lift harvesters. Neither can I. That's what pulleys are for. I am an alien, a survivor of an extinct species. I will draw attention, more bounty hunters, more complications." Ben flopped back on his pillow, wincing. "Rusty, tell her." The bot beeped, processing. "Lyrathan, you've been a resident of Plot 42 for 13 days. In that time, you have improved farm efficiency by 37%, repaired equipment Ben had abandoned as unfixable, and prevented total annihilation of primary structures. You have also learned to properly brew coffee. This unit calculates your value as immeasurably positive." "See," Ben said, "math doesn't lie. But I am dangerous." "Yeah, so's a plasma cutter. Still useful if you don't point it at your face." He looked at her seriously now, past the banter. "Lyra, you're not dangerous? You're powerful. There's a difference. And now you're powerful in a way that fits through doorways. That's actually an upgrade." She sat back, something complicated moving across her face. Relief, maybe, or disbelief, or the strange, fragile hope of someone who'd expected rejection so completely that kindness felt like a lie. "I do not understand you," she said quietly. "I have studied your species since arriving. You are short-lived, fragile, prone to making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. You should have given me to the Zyrith. You should have chosen survival over principle. Yeah, we should do lots of things. Eat better, sleep more, not argue with warships." He smiled. "But we also hug our broken robots and watch sunsets we can't measure and die for people we've known for less than 2 weeks. We're a mess. We're beautiful disasters who weaponize farm equipment and call it tactics. And you know what? What? We're still here. Humanity. We've been killed, conquered, scattered across 100 systems, and we keep getting back up. We keep making coffee and planting crops and protecting the small things because someone has to, because the big things, the empires and the consortiums and the perfectly logical species, they forget what matters. What matters? This." He gestured at the room, the farm, the world outside the window. The little worlds. The quiet places where people just live, where they drink bad coffee and fix broken equipment and take in strays who fall from the sky. He met her eyes. "You spent your whole life being big, being a weapon, being what your empire needed. Maybe it's time to be small, to be what you need." She was crying again, but these tears were different, smaller, human-sized. They fell on his floor and didn't carve craters, just made small dark spots that would dry by morning. "I would like that," she whispered. "I would like to be small with you." "Good, because I need help rebuilding, and you're the only person I know who can read engineering manuals in 3 days." He paused. "Also, now that you're not sitting on the barn anymore, we might need to build you an actual room." She laughed through her tears. "Only if I can help design it." "Deal." 5 years later, travelers on Taraxis 4 sometimes spoke of a strange farm on the northern edge of Plot 42. A place where a human and a luminous woman lived together in a house that seemed to glow softly at night, where the crops grew in patterns no conventional farmer would use, and where visitors, rare as they were always offered coffee and told to sit. The Zyreth Consortium, after losing a frigate and 40 drones to what their reports called a planetary defense anomaly, quietly removed Coriel bounties from their database. Some mistakes weren't worth repeating. Ben never got back his NCC W1701B, but he built something better with parts from the fallen frigate, something that ran smoother, lasted longer, and only occasionally sparked in ways that defied physics. He called it the Lyra Special. She called it the Terrible Mistake. Rusty called it the Dave Mobile. They were all correct. One evening, sitting on the porch they'd rebuilt together, watching a sunset they'd never calculate, Lyra turned to Ben. "Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice? Fighting instead of running?" Ben sipped his coffee, now merely bad instead of catastrophic, a improvement he credited to her influence. "Every choice is the right one if you survive it long enough to complain about the consequences." He looked at her, this woman who'd been a giant, who'd learned to be human-sized, who'd chosen a small world over the vast, empty dark. Besides, someone had to teach the universe an important lesson. "Huh? What lesson?" "That you don't mess with small things, because small things have nothing left to lose, which makes them the most dangerous things in existence." He smiled. "We're not big. We're not powerful. We don't have empires or logic or perfectly optimized anything. But we're stubborn, we're loyal, and we will absolutely fight warships with tractors if you threaten the people we love." She leaned against him, her weight warm and solid, and wonderfully, impossibly real. "Humanity, fuck yeah," she said, testing the phrase he'd taught her. "Humanity, fuck yeah," he agreed. And above them, the sky turned red and gold, signaling nothing but another day survived, another sunset shared, another moment of being beautifully, defiantly alive. In the distance, Rusty beeped contentedly. "Good evening, Dave. All systems normal. No warships detected. Shall I prepare dinner?" "Yeah," Ben said. "Make extra. We're celebrating." Celebrating what, Dave?" Ben looked at Lyra, at the farm they'd defended, at the small, perfect world they'd built from wreckage and stubbornness, and the kind of love that makes giants kneel and humans stand. "Celebrating being small," he said, "and all the impossible things small can do." Somewhere in the galaxy, another warship made a note. Another bounty was quietly erased. Another empire learned that some little worlds, some quiet farms, some stubborn humans and their impossible friends were better left alone. Not because they couldn't be conquered, but because the cost of conquering them was remembering that empires fall and equations lie, and sometimes the only thing that matters is protecting the small world you've chosen to call home. Even if you have to tear the sky down to do it, especially then. Maybe the point was never to win wars or build empires. Maybe it was to learn how to hold something fragile without breaking it. Ben and Lyra didn't just survive. They proved that smallness, when chosen, can be the loudest defiance in the universe. Because in a galaxy obsessed with power, they discovered something rarer, gentleness as rebellion. So what makes a world worth protecting? Its size, or the hands willing to rebuild it? When was the last time you defended something small simply because it was yours? And if someone threatened your little world, would you fight back with logic or with love? If you made it this far, write the word small in the comments. A single word, but one that built an entire universe tonight. Tell us where you're watching from, so this tiny farm on Taraxis 4 can feel your signal across the stars. Subscribe, like, share this story with someone who's ever felt insignificant, and stay until the end screen to watch the next chapter of humanity being beautifully, stubbornly impossible. Because sometimes, being small is the most powerful thing we can be.